All right. Hello and welcome to the Lost Confederacy channel. This is week 7 of the 13-week.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay. Good now. All right, perfect. Hello, this is week 7 of the 13-week fiscal program for American prisoners of war. Today we have myself, Chief Biko, Chief Alligator, Chief Quietwater, as well as Chief Black Coat. Can you hear me? Okay. And here, as always, we focus more so on that first letter in the acronym APOW, which is American. Today, we will go ahead and start off with our 12 steps for recovery. Let me share my screen.
Okay. Okay, I got 12 steps this week. So the 13-week practical program of action for each American prisoner of war. Number 1, learn about the estate or estates your family originated from. Number 2, who established that estate. Number 3, what tribes and confederacy had jurisdiction over that area prior to the European. Number 4, ask all nonprofit organizations you attend, what's your position on reparations? Number 5, they either support it or they don't. No support, no money. However, if they support it, then children and adults need weekly classes free of charge about steps 1, 2, and 3. In addition, field trips to APOW landmarks in that city, county, and state are needed. Number 6, don't support European holidays for the remainder of the 13-week time frame. Number 7, avoid spending money with any small business that doesn't hire your people, gas stations, nail salons, subways, corner stores. Number 8, all businesses need operating cash, spend money with American businesses. Number 9, all other groups rely on our energy and operating cash to survive. Set the trends of making other groups follow our lead and support our clubs, services, products, and entertainment. Number 10, the U.S. government is bankrupt. The Federal Reserve prints money, i.e. quantitative easing. It also burns money, i.e. quantitative tightening. The U.S. dollar hasn't been backed by gold since Richard Nixon in 1971, the Gold Standard Act. The government operates off full faith of its citizens to pay debts and taxes. American prisoners of war no longer have faith in the U.S. government. This is why financial support will be altered, stopped, and redirected. Number 11, teach your kids 1 hour a day about their history on this land. Have them learn about an American inventor. Have them know about our heroes. They should know that the European that conquered the estate you live in. They should know the nation of people prior to the European invasion, militarily and culturally. And number 12, practicing these steps will educate us on the land we're claiming America and attaches us to the history and laws of the U.S. government. Every estate American prisoner of war live in should have steps 1, 2, and 3 advertised via social media, radio, and newspaper. This in 13 weeks, 1 fiscal quarter will bring us together for our common cause. Today, what stands out to me would be number 7, avoid spending money with any small businesses that don't hire your people, gas station, nail salons, subways, corner stores, etc. I think that we just have to consciously make an effort, even though it's somewhat challenging sometimes making that effort because there's not many Black or American-owned businesses. So I think that one stands out to me just as a reminder that we have to be more selective in who we actually do business with.
Definitely agree with that. Mine kind of just, I guess, piggybacks off of that one. Probably number 9. All other groups rely on our energy and operating cash to survive. So set the trends to making other groups follow our lead and support, our club services, products. So those pretty much go hand in hand. We know we pretty much, again, create everything as far as trends, what's fashionable, what's hot. So as long as we're doing, what we're supposed to do as far as spending money with our group of people, then I think it'll catch on anyway. So that kind of just, like I said, just piggybacks off of what you said in regards to number 7.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and copycat you on that one on number 9. Just all other groups rely on our energy. I feel like once our people, the Americans, really truly understand that everybody's kind of waiting for the next big thing from us, and then the world gravitates off of it and actually consumes off of it and makes money and revenue off of it. That's standing out to me a lot right now. So yeah, number 9, realizing other groups use our energy to move forward is huge.
I'm gonna go with step 3 today. What tribe and Confederacy had jurisdiction over that area prior to the European? That just goes in alignment with 1866 first ever hearing that we're about to go over today. Most of us don't understand that we come from confederacies and that we were, through wars, occupied by the European. So 3 steps out to me.
Thank you all, chiefs, for sharing that. Next, we'll have Chief Alligator with this week's American Inventor.
All right, so this one's going to be it's a little bit of information. Let me share this screen real quick. See if we can do this. Boom, got lucky. Okay. Bear with me, my screen is running. Today's inventor is going to be Charles Richard Patterson. He was born April of 1833, and he was born under military occupation on a Virginia plantation. He escaped military occupation in 1861 and settled in Greenfield, Ohio. This is an image of him right here. Can y'all see my screen? Okay. Charles Patterson worked as a blacksmith for a carriage business, Dines and Simpsons. He then went into partnership with J.P. Lowe, a Greensfield manufacturer. In 1893, Patterson bought out J.P. Lowe's shares of the business and reorganized it as C.R. Patterson and Sons Company. The company built 28 types of horse-drawn vehicles. Patterson died in 1910, leaving the business to his son, Frederick, who in turn converted the company from a carriage business into an automobile manufacturer. The first car debuted in 1915, and you're looking at that vehicle right here on this picture. So this is the son of Mr. Charles Richard Patterson. First car debuted in 1915 and was sold for $850, a 4-cylinder Continental engine, more sophisticated than the Ford Model T. C.R. Patterson and Sons couldn't match Ford's manufacturing capability. They built 150 cars. You can't find any of these cars. None of them are in a museum or anything. They're pretty much, it's like they don't exist. They switched to production of trucks, buses, and other utility vehicle bodies. And in 1920, they reorganized again as Greenfield Bus Body Company, but the Great Depression sent the company down, and the son, Frederick Patterson, died in 1932. So you can see the newspaper article. This was the first vehicle that they made, and you can see once they got their craft together, you can see the difference between generation 1 and generation 2. And Ford actually contracted with them to build his Ford Model T car. So Ford gets the credit for inventing the automobile. It was actually us. And this is the newspaper article coming out of Greensfield, Ohio. And this is the car that was deemed more sophisticated than the Ford Model T, this one right here. And again, this is the image of them, of the son. So again, we're just debunking the slave narrative. All of these men are intelligent. They're inventors. We see them in suit and tie. And y'all thoughts on this one?
Never surprises me. And just our people looking like gentlemen, suit and ties, as if they just know it. Day-to-day activity.
Now, this was a good one though, very good one. Just showing, you know, us having our fingerprint in that automobile industry. And then, you know, just the not being able, I guess, to scale it out on that large scale manufacturing, just because we know military occupation, things of that nature. So just another example of, you know, our genius as a people. And like you said, just more sophisticated than the Ford Model T, but they had all of that industrial, you know, revolutionary manufacturing, you know, things going on with that way that they had, you know, to scale that product. So just another example of, you know, our genius.
I agree with everyone. Just another example of an industry that we don't run, but we're the ones who invented it. So I agree with what everyone else said.
Or get recognized for it.
That's a great inventor for this week. Next, we'll have Chief Black Coat with this week's Dr. Woodson quote.
All right, this is what we're going to go with the very last quote. So quote 13, the race has great possibilities. Properly awakened, the Negro can do the so-called impossible in the business world and thus help to govern rather than merely be governed. So that was quote 13. Probably went too fast.
A good quote for this week. Good quote. Kind of just right in alignment with what we just was talking about with that inventor. She just being able to tap into that potential that we have to create and just create something new, innovative that the world has never seen. Very good quote. I'll go ahead and jump into the legal definitions as well as the maroon historical points. Number one, American, someone indigenous to America. Number two, descendants, one who follows in the bloodline of an ancestor, either lineally or collaterally. Number three, slavery, a situation in which one person has absolute power over the life, fortune, and liberty of another. Number four, prisoner of war, a person, usually a soldier, who is captured by or surrenders to the enemy in wartime. Number five is school, any institution at which instruction is given in a particular discipline, education, and enlightening experience. And number seven, recovery, a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength, the action or process of regaining possession of something stolen or lost. And lastly, the maroon historical points. Number one was a person escaping slavery, seeking freedom, or breaking the law. Number two, providing unity and a strong defense came first. Number three, maroon leaders were first and foremost military figures. Number four, Maroons established guerrilla warfare, planting sharp sticks in thick grass. And number five, Maroons knew their European enemies' language, defenses, and plans. And that is our legal definitions and Maroon historical points. And last but not least, we'll jump into the Constitution, which will definitely be citing back to today in regards to the hearing. But definitely just want to highlight a few points to kind of set the stage here. All right, here we go. All right, so first and foremost, Article 1, Section 10 states, no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. So this is always going to be one of the first contradictions that we continue to highlight every week, because it's clearly saying here within this government's foundational document that established this whole government that only gold and silver coin is tender for payment of debts. So everything that we're using currently, as Chief Quietwater had read off earlier in step 10, they took the money out of the system in 1971 with the Gold Standard Act. So we're no longer using gold or silver, then we're not paying off any debts. So that's the first contradiction that we always like to highlight. We'll jump down to Article 2, Section 2, I believe. And this just highlights the president's power. So the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of several states. So again, most of us may know that the president is the commander-in-chief of the Army, Navy, any of the armed forces in general, but not a lot of us, including myself, before reading this, knew that he had the power over the militia as well. So whenever we're seeing things, these unidentified groups of individuals hopping out of Penske vans or Penske trucks or wherever they may be hopping out of, they're being controlled or being commanded by the president, because he has the power to enact not only the Army and Navy, but also the militia of several states. So again, not just one, but several states, whichever states have militias within them. And last but not least, Article 6, this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding. So here's just clearly stating that the treaty is the supreme law of the land. The hearing that we're about to dive a little bit deeper into pretty much discusses those treaties and how they aren't being upheld by the United States. So again, that's a direct contradiction of what we're about to be listening to in this 1866 Indian Treaty hearing that was held, I want to say maybe 2 weeks ago at max. I want to say maybe 3 at max, but not long at all. So just some things to kind of think about, have on your mind while we go ahead and continue to just rip apart this whole narrative of, who we are and who is supposed to be, I guess, puppeteering as the Americans. So we'll definitely jump back into it. I think I had it paused last week at where we stopped, because I think we only got 3 minutes into the hearing before we had to go ahead and start shutting some stuff down. So we'll just play a little clip. And geez, we're going to be stopping after each speaker, correct? After they give their spiel. Y'all hear me? Okay, got you. So I'm gonna go ahead and just play this and we'll get into it.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening today's very, very important, and as you have noted, a historic hearing. I apologize that I'm not there in person, but COVID is keeping me here in Alaska for this week. The history of the post-Civil War Reconstruction Treaty tribes, the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee, and Seminole nations, often referred to as the 5 tribes, and the freedmen, the lineal descendants of African American slaves owned by the 5 tribes, is part of history that perhaps many Americans are not familiar with, nor do they fully understand. It is a complicated history of injustice and of sorrow for both Indian tribes and African Americans. And as you have noted, Mr. Chairman, this can be an uncomfortable discussion. It can be uncomfortable to talk about what was brought on by the federal government's own policies of forced removal of Native peoples from their ancestral homelands and the enslavement of African peoples. I understand that each of the 5 tribes has a very unique history with freedmen based on separate treaties with the United States. So I am interested in learning more about what these treaties entail and the obligations of both the tribes and the federal government to freedmen descendants. So I do want to say how appreciative I am that the Indian Affairs Committee is examining this history, and that the 5 tribes and the freedmen descendants are here, along with the Department of Interior, to have a constructive and, again, a respectful dialogue about how we might move forward together. This is indeed long, long overdue. I agree with the chairman that we should task the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, with investigating what federal services the freedmen receive and should receive in the future from the federal government. And with that, I turn back to you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you for convening this very important and very substantive hearing. And for the many witnesses that are there in person today, thank you for traveling to be before the committee on a very important topic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very
All right. So I guess I'll go ahead and just pop it off. First thing that stood out to me, she classified the freedmen as African Americans. I'm going to go ahead and just pull up that document in case any of our viewers from last week did not see when we pretty much debunked that and identified who the actual freedmen were. They were actually just refugees. It said nothing about African Americans. It said nothing about colored, Negro, blacks, any reclassification term that they wanted to deem or put on us. So I'll make sure, go ahead and pull this up. And again, I think that was going to be, I want to say exhibit number 6 or something like that we had from last week. So again, here, 1 year after thereafter, a Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. Go ahead and continue to read, to which shall be committed as hereinafter provided the supervision and management of all abandoned lands and the control of all subjects relating to refugees and freedmen from rebel states. So we clearly pointed this out last week. Freedmen from rebel states, freedmen, those meaning, again, or we just skipped the rebel states. We were never a part of this government at this point. So any people coming out of this rebel states mean that they had to be a part of this government. So why do we continue to attach ourselves to this freedmen term if we weren't a part of these rebel states is beyond me. Refugees and freedmen is clearly saying are those that were actually fighting against their own government. Their own government meaning they were a part of it. Again, we were never a part of this government. So how can we continue to attach ourselves, or why do they continue to attach us as well? As he just stated, African Americans being freedmen. So that's just the first question I'll pose, and that pretty much just rebutes or contradicts exactly what she's stating. So she said she likes to, would like to hear more about these individual treaties from these 5 tribes, but she clearly doesn't have a clear understanding of what the Freedmen's Bureau Act is and who it's for, because she's attaching African Americans to freedmen and vice versa. So I'll let you all kind of build off that as we go.
As we go through the video, one thing we should notice, or what we should point out, is they're going to always truly take the picture off the true American. So even though they might name tribes, people that we actually derive from, as you said, Chief Biko, these people pretending to be, the chiefs of these tribes, they're going to always make sure the camera isn't focused on the true Americans, which looks like who we are on the channel, and everybody else knows, Black people, as they quote unquote say, who we are. So throughout this whole entire stand, they never actually talk about the true Americans, and that's one thing I'm gonna just point out.
I agree with Chief Blackcoat. We just have to read. I think that's just the most important thing about this, is that we just have to read and understand this information. And I just appreciate us being able to have this platform to read and explain the different things that we've been fed throughout all of these years, and we believe these things. you know, it's clear, it's here, it's in the Freedmen's Bureau Act that we were not the freedmen. So we just have to read and understand and go back and learn our history.
I made 6 quick notes when she was speaking. I put it in the chat for us to see, but she said post-Civil War tribes. She said freedmen and Afro-Americans, complicated tribes / Afro-American. Her 4th statement was forced removal by the US government. 5, Indian Affairs and Department of Interior. And 6, the GOA, Government Accountability Office. So I'm gonna hit on 1 and 5 and 6. Post-Civil War, that was the first thing that came out of her mouth. To be at the federal level and to be that uninformed about what really happened on behalf of this government, it really just stands out. That's 2 representatives now at this first ever hearing about the 1866 Indian Treaty. And they either don't belong in the room or this is just a stage play to continue to ignore us, as Chief Blackcoat mentioned. I'm gonna say it's a stage play and they're not qualified to be in the room. I don't believe these people have actually read these documents because they say it just, they let Civil War flow right off their lips. These freedmen, if you read this document, there's no way we can come up under the War Department because we're not citizens of it. The most important thing is the chess game that they're playing in this hearing. We've read in the treaty how the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Department of Interior, the United States government has its own people implanted in those agencies. So you're not going to get a fair hearing out of this. It's almost like when a cop kills one of us, it's like an internal investigation. We know how that goes. So the fact that you got these 2 bureaus already infiltrated by United States government citizens, and then you created a new one that we've never seen in a treaty of the 1866, which is the Government Accountability Office. That's just another fancy word for we're going to inventory our own selves. Well, nobody can look at themselves personally. It's got to be done by an outside group. So we have to elevate ourselves, because how long are we going to keep letting the European play the game of let me just look at myself and let me figure out what I did wrong? That never happens. That's outside of natural law. It doesn't work like that. You have to have an outside party also be involved. So what they're doing right now is just continuing to live in denial about what they've done. I'll stop right there.
Absolutely, and all great points made by all of you chiefs. And again, I don't think we're 10 minutes within the video and already pretty much ripping it apart in regards to just the blatant lies that, you know, now 2 United States representatives, because those are the first 2 that have spoken thus far, state Civil War, calling, you know, African Americans freedmen and vice versa. So again, nobody that looks like us is representing us within this hearing, as you will continue to see. So I'll go ahead and continue to play, and we'll continue to go ahead and pick apart this hearing.
Much, Vice Chair Murkowski, and we wish you a speedy recovery and look forward to seeing you soon. Are there other members of the committee wishing to make an opening statement? If not, we'll turn to our first witness, who is a towering figure in history enough so that she comprises her own panel. We are pleased to introduce the Honorable Maxine Waters, U.S. Representative for the 43rd Congressional District in California. Congresswoman, your full written testimony will be made part of the official hearing record, and we look forward to your remarks. Please proceed with your testimony.
Vice Chair Murkowski and members of the committee. Today, I'm here to discuss an issue I care very deeply about, but has been ignored for far too long. Many remain unfamiliar with the history of those who came to be known as the Native American freedmen and the ongoing plight of their descendants. The freedmen were Black individuals who were enslaved by 5 formerly slave-holding tribal nations and were forced to walk and suffer on the Trail of Tears alongside their slave masters. A year after the Civil War ended, the 5 tribes agreed to abolish slavery and accept freedmen and their descendants as full tribal citizens under the 1866 treaty agreements they made with the United States government. Specifically, the 1866 treaties required the 5 tribes to abolish slavery and to agree to treat and accept formerly enslaved individuals and their lineal descendants as equal tribal citizens. For example, the treaty signed by the Cherokee Nation reads, and I quote, "All native-born Cherokee, all Indians and whites legally members of the nation by adoption, and all freemen who have been liberated by voluntary act of their former owners or by law, as well as free colored persons who were in the country at the commencement of the rebellion and are now residents therein, or who may return within 6 months from the 19th day of July, 1866, and their descendants who reside within the limits of the Cherokee Nation, shall be taken and deemed to be citizens of the Cherokee Nation," quote unquote. The 4 other tribes all signed similar treaties. Despite the fact that these treaty obligations still exist and are binding on the 5 tribes beginning in the late 1970s and early 1980s, the tribes began to take formal actions to take away the citizenship rights of descendants of freedmen. For instance, in 1983, freedmen were prohibited from voting in Cherokee Nation elections and received letters informing them that their citizenship had been canceled. In 2007, the Cherokee amended their constitution to limit citizenship to only individuals who were, quote, Cherokee by blood, unquote. These actions led to years of litigation that was finally settled in 2017 when a federal district court judge ruled in favor of the freedmen and their right to citizenship. In this ruling, the judge stated, and I quote, "In accordance with Article 9 of the 1866 treaty, the Cherokee freedmen have a present right to citizenship in the Cherokee Nation that is coexistent with the rights of Native Cherokees," quote unquote. Following the court decision, which the Cherokee Nation accepted as binding, the tribe has taken actions to comply with the decision and ensure that descendants of freedmen are treated as equal citizens. Before my committee, Cherokee Nation Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin testified that these actions have made the Cherokee Nation, quote, a better nation for having recognized full and equal citizenship of freedmen descendants. Despite the actions of the Cherokee to right the wrong inflicted on its freedmen, the descendants of freedmen of the other 4 tribes continue to be denied tribal citizenship and other basic rights associated with citizenship, like equal access to federally funded affordable housing. My committee even heard testimony last year that freedmen have even been denied access to life-saving vaccines during the ongoing pandemic. It was this testimony that prompted even the Biden administration to designate all Seminole freedmen as eligible for healthcare services, including the COVID vaccine, through the Indian Health Service. However, this only decision only applies to Seminole freedmen and not freedmen from the other tribes. We know that equal access to housing sits at the heart of many of the racial and economic injustices we continue to see across the country today. As chairwoman of the House Financial Services Committee, I recognize that Native communities face some of the worst housing conditions in the United States. It is also important to recognize that the legacy of land and cultural disenfranchisement has created and maintained these circumstances. That is why I propose providing $2 billion for affordable housing in tribal communities in my Housing is Infrastructure Act, and why I'm moving to reauthorize NAHASTA with language that ensures that descendants of freedmen have equal access to these resources, as the 1866 treaties promised. When Barney Frank, my predecessor, was chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, he recognized the plight of the freedmen and was a staunch advocate for their rights. I worked closely with him on legislation to prevent tribes from disenfranchising their descendants. As ranking member and now chairwoman of the committee, I continue that fight for justice for the descendants of freedmen. Currently, there are tribes that are implementing federally funded programs in a way that actively discriminates against descendants of freedmen in direct violation of treaty obligations. Congress has every right to ensure that federal funding implemented in compliance with all relevant obligations. We must stand by the rights promised to freedmen and the treaties that guaranteed those rights over a century ago and hold these tribes accountable. I'd like to say how proud I am of the descendants of Native freedmen who have never wavered in their fight for human dignity and equal recognition, even when it seemed no one would listen, even with the growing movement for reparations that recognizes the forced and uncompensated labor that built this country and the riches amassed because of it. It seems that the fight of the descendants of freedmen still has never been rightfully acknowledged and affirmed. This pandemic has made clear that the ongoing discrimination of the freedmen descendants can literally mean the difference between life and death for descendants of freedmen who have been denied COVID vaccines. So I urge the distinguished members of this committee, we must honor our word as a nation and uphold as honorable people the obligations of these treaties. This is as much true for the United States government, which has failed to meet all of its treaty obligations, as it is for the 5 tribes. This work is ongoing, and it is the obligation to the descendants of freedmen that can't be left out of that conversation. I want to thank again Senator Schatz for holding this important hearing and working with me on this issue. And I must indicate that even though there appears to be only one representative here for the freedmen, I would like, if at all possible, to make sure that the voices of other freedmen are heard in some sense, in some way. And while I'm pleased that the United States Senate is finally hearing testimony from a freedman descendant, I must state that hearing from more voices, not less, is the key to productive dialogue. It is when we don't expand our table to hear more from those who have been disenfranchised that injustices and systemic inequities are perpetuated. So moving forward, I'm convinced that we can work together to not simply uplift the voices of freedmen, but also to recognize the shared suffering of Native freedmen and Native Americans forced to walk that trail of tears together, and the need to honor the treaties of 1866. I do not believe that the documented history of the descendants of freedmen can be ignored, forgotten, or dismissed any longer. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much.
And stop right there. I seen Chief Alligator eyes light up a little bit on some of those points. So I'll let you pop us off with this one.
Okay. If we can go back to the 7 minute, yep, let's go to the 7 minute and 40 minute mark. We first have to understand, as prisoners of war, who she is at this hearing. She's a member of the Black Congressional Caucus, and she's also the chairman of the Federal Housing Committee. So she runs anything dealing with federal housing. She's at a hearing specifically advocating for a quote unquote group called Freedmen. When have we ever seen this Federal Housing Committee chairperson advocate for us during this pandemic? That's the first question that you have to ask yourself. She's going very hard for a group called Freedmen dealing with 5 other nations. This is not the United States government citizens that actually vote for her. She's advocating for citizens of 5 other tribes or nations. So that's the first thing that jumps out to me. Who's she fighting for? Who team is she on? So you got the third agent that we've seen from the United States government, and we're benign and neglected. We're not even mentioned. If you can go to that 7:40 mark, Chief Biko, and just play real quick, because what we want to hear, we're gonna let it run for about a minute. She's reading from the Cherokee 1866 Indian Treaty, and out her lips, off that page of that treaty, she's gonna read the word rebellion, which further proves there was no Civil War. It's on mute.
As equal tribal citizens. For example, the treaty signed by the Cherokee Nation reads, and I quote, "All native-born Cherokee, all Indians and whites legally members of the nation by adoption, and all freemen who have been liberated by voluntary act of their former owners or by law, as well as free colored persons who were in the country at the commencement of the rebellion and are now residents therein, or
Right
who may
there.
return."
She just said, reading the treaty herself, she just said rebellion.
Mhm.
So this further proves that there was no Civil War, but more importantly, she also says in that treaty how the United States government is making up what the new Cherokee will be. The original Cherokee east of the Mississippi River looked like everybody on this channel. She said whites and orphans are included as Cherokee. You can't do. So you're gonna make up what the new Cherokee Nation is in Oklahoma, but then you're gonna turn around and try to discriminate on freedmen, whatever this is. It's all fugazi. Y'all wanna build on that?
Like Chief Alligator had said in the beginning, you know, he feels like this is a staged type of deal here. And just point out to the first few seconds as Maxine Waters started talking, she just spewed a bunch of false information, just how she was mix matching a whole bunch of words and saying all of these things about freedom. So it's kind of hard to watch this and take it serious, knowing the misinformation being spewed. It's like, okay, if you're reading a document, how are you confusing all of these people with quote unquote who she's advocating for, Black people, or well, she's not advocating for us. She's advocating for somebody I don't even know exists out there on the east of the Mississippi. So it's hard to see like what are you talking about? That's what I'm getting to. Like, what are you talking about? And when, like you said, creating a person. So once this mystical group of people come alive, what is it gonna get? And it seems like it's gonna be going towards, you know, Europeans that claim, you know, these tribes, these $5 Indians.
I agree. Also in regards to just the representation, like you said, she's going extremely hard for this cause. And for what? You know, for what are we getting out of it? Is there anything specific for us? And I just think, again, the fact that she is a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, it's an agenda. It's definitely an agenda for them to benign and neglect us even further. So for her to even participate in this is kind of like another slap in the face, as it always is when it comes to us being represented properly.
And being a representative of the Black Congressional Caucus, you know, that word Black stands out pretty bold there. And the group of people that's called Black seems to never be being talked about. So it's like,
Even by the
again,
representatives.
what are you talking about and who are you talking about?
You know, but definitely one thing stood out to me. She kept saying Native American freedmen. It kind of just highlighted to you all's points. They're creating this, yeah, they're creating this fictional person that's really, you know, wearing a mask as us, the real Americans. So Native American freedmen, again, like Chief Alligator highlighted, you're bringing in, you know, white citizens and white peasantry class and these other different groups of people that's claiming to be our, you know, actual names, our tribal names. But again, we're not being mentioned in regards to any of these sections. I did want to go ahead and just pull up that Indian treaty to show that that same language is going to be in all of the treaties as far as just rebellion. So it's not like it's just, you know, associated with one, the late rebellion. So it's going to be, and as she stated, most of these treaties with these different, you know, quote unquote nations now are going to have pretty much have the same language. And as you can see, they all call it a rebellion, a late rebellion. Nothing in regards to Civil War or anything of that nature. So again, just major lies being told by 3 now members of the United States government. First 3 people that we've listened to speak have been members or representatives of the United States government. So again, they're just playing on these people's ignorance pretty much, because how can you read a document stating that it's a rebellion, but yet you're saying that it was a civil war? The two don't make sense.
Right, after the Trail of Tears, and it seems like they just want to continue with that one little story they teach in schools, the Trail of Tears. And it's like, okay, we get it, the Trail of Tears. What else was going on? Why did these people have to move west, have to take that trip? And it, again, just the false information. It's just like, okay, we get it, get the Trail of Tears. What are we really talking about here? And what they're trying to talk about is the actual split of the family. But again, just not talking about the niggas still on the southeast. Talking about everybody on the west, you know, or whatever they created over there in the west. And it's like, what's up with all this representation for them, all this money, and because the ghetto kind of still looks like where they live. They probably live however they live, but the ghettos don't look much better, you know. And go back to kids having to sell water. Those are Black children, Maxine Water, you know, Black Congressional Caucus. Just little things that I'm just like, what are we talking about?
Can you do another search while you got it up, Chief Biko, on abolish of slavery? Because we never read that in the treaty. So they're talking about they're trying to put slavery on the tribes. And maybe we overread it.
2 Article 1, either slavery or involuntary servitude, otherwise than in punishment of crimes. So pretty much the same verbiage that we see in the 13th Amendment, which again states nothing about Black people, colored, Negro. It just says slavery and involuntary servitude. So again, trying to attach ourselves to these terms is what's really going to fuck us over as a group. And you see, they're doing a great job as far as these 3 representatives from the United States is trying to freedmen, African American, freedmen, you know, Blacks, like they're trying to make you subconsciously think that freedmen is you, when in actuality it's not. They're very specific when it comes to our group of people, because we are always left out of things. So it doesn't say
I know, like they're just lying about the freedmen part.
Blatantly lying. Blatantly lying.
Can you put in abolish in the key search real quick?
Yeah.
Because that list looks like they're saying moving forward, you can't enslave. But let's look up abolish, because she used the key term abolish slavery, as if that's what if that's what was going on.
And nothing in there.
Okay, so we know that they weren't enslaving because they didn't use the word abolish. Abolish like means to stop.
Correct.
Other thing, can you put in Afro-American, because she keeps using that word. Is Afro-American in this treaty?
It's African American. Just African descent.
All right, and when does that sentence say?
Right here, let me see. Choctaw and Chickasaw nations respectively shall have made such laws, rules, and regulations as may be necessary to give all persons of African descent resident in the said nation at the date of the Treaty of Fort Smith and their descendants heretofore held in slavery among said nations, all the rights, privileges, and immunities, including the right of suffrage, of citizenship, citizens of said nation, except in annuities, monies, and public domain claimed by or belonging to said nation respectively.
Okay, now let's put in Negro real quick. So that's referring to the person of African descent. Put in Negro. All right, what's it say about Negro?
So said nation further agree that all Negroes not otherwise disqualified or disabled shall be competent witnesses in all civil and criminal suits and proceedings in the Choctaw and Chickasaw courts, any law to the contrary notwithstanding, and they fully recognize that the right of the freedmen to a fair remuneration of reasonable and equitable contracts for their labor, which the law should aid them to enforce. And they agree on the part of their respective nations that all laws shall be equal in their operations upon Choctaws, Chickasaws, and Negroes, and that
Stop right there. Stop right there. We're talking about two different people in this paragraph right here. You're talking about Negroes and freedmen. So we read over this when we went over this treaty. You got Negroes, you got freedmen, and you got people from African descent. All right, what they're not talking about is the Negro, because the Negro has the right to participate in their civil and criminal court system and their civil and criminal suits and proceedings in the Choctaw and Chickasaw courts. They're not talking about that person. That's the free disenfranchised person who's originally Cherokee from the East Coast. Now he got caught up in the Trail of Tears going west, but he's not a freedman and he's not of African descent. So he's Negro. So he can maneuver through our system just like Choctaw and Chickasaw can. Y'all want to build on that? That's
sovereign.
They're leaving out. They're leaving out the Negro.
Leaving out the sovereign person, the person that's original to the land. So like you said, that's a great point. They highlight the freedmen. They highlight the African American, the African now turned United States citizen, basically. But they do not highlight the Negro. And as you stated, they have equal in their operations, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and those who don't want to be considered within these nations because now they're being pulled up underneath this umbrella. So that's a great point there. You had something there, Chief Blackcoat or Chief Hardwater?
I agree with both of you. I think, again, it just comes down to them just writing us off, basically. I think that's what it just all boils down to, is them just the wordplay, just the straight omission of us, basically, is what I pick up on that.
And I just want to kind of read down a little further. So upon Choctaws, Chickasaws, and Negroes, and that no distinction affecting the latter meaning the Negroes, shall at any time be made, and that they shall be treated with kindness and be protected against injury. And they further agree that while the said freedmen now in Choctaw and Chickasaw Nation remain in said nations respectively, they shall be entitled to as much land as they may cultivate to support themselves and family. So it sounds like the Negro,
two different groups of people.
Sounds like the Negro just has what he always had, which is basically sovereignty. Like, we know this your land. So whenever y'all pass through, we gonna make sure y'all get y'all respect. Any of this land y'all really want to claim, you can claim. But outside of that, everybody else, y'all structured in these sections, things of that nature.
One thing that always went through my mind when reading these documents is when they would describe the Choctaws or Chickasaws and then say Negroes. That question in mind was like, okay, well, who are the Negroes? Knowing today, nigga, so it's like, oh yeah, so great point pointed out by Chief Deacon and Chief Alligator with that's also Americans that got lost in transaction. Whatever was going down, what they refer to Trail of Tears all the time. Yeah, just caught up in the mix of it, and now we can't identify you, but you have all the privileges as, you know, the rest of the said nations, because we know we can look at you and tell, okay, he American Negro.
And I got a question. So if we know that they reclassified us, what, let's just say every 50 years, every 30 years, we know that one of our classifications was Negro. So
Right.
if we're just jumping to every time they changed our classification, whether it be Negro to colored to Black to African American, if we just go back to the derivative, who's representing us again within this hearing?
Negro.
Nobody. She said freedmen, and they're talking about the Native Americans.
Right.
But what about the most important piece in this whole, hearing that isn't being represented? So again,
Can somebody make a note on this, Article 4 with the Negro, so we can add this to the video when we finish. I just want to throw a reminder out about what they called the Seminole, which was really tribes under the Creek Confederacy that were collapsing during the wars, and why they were sending us west. Everybody that didn't go west, that's when they just started name tagging. But from a business standpoint, the Negro never contracted to be a citizen of the Choctaw and Chickasaw. So we're still a part of that group that never contracted. So they're like, okay, Choctaw, Chickasaw, but this Negro, yeah, he can maneuver through your system the same way as you can, Choctaw, Chickasaw. We got to highlight that when you look up the definition of Negro, it means it'll go to niggardly, which means stubborn. The European was looking at, there's a group of people in America that do not do business with us. And they said we were niggardly.
and that's what Chief Blacko that highlighted. I know you highlighted that before. It's like, yes, the stubborn, like they're unwilling to, compromise. It just makes sense. Go ahead, Chief.
I think, excuse me, I think that we kind of read something like that in the Special Order 15 as well. How I can't remember exactly, but it's like we weren't controlled. They had to come up with something because they couldn't control us, basically.
Just got occupied.
Assimilation.
Yeah, like legit.
And the last point I'll make on that is, how are we letting them give a pass to just making white people Cherokee, a part of the Cherokee tribe? Like, she said it out her mouth, whites shall be citizens. Like, how are we not having an issue with that? Like, you can't just write in that white people are going to be Cherokee.
Claiming to be Americans. And now it's like they can just pick and choose a tribe. And that's what be beating me up, because it's like, they're not American. Like, why? What's weird is NBA has this thing to where it's called NBA Euro. And it's just all white people that play in Europe that come over to the American League, the NBA. And it's like, can y'all not see that these white people are European? Like, it's called NBA Euro. Like, these are all white people coming over. If it was called NBA American, we're sending over Europeans. But it's like, hold on, you're not fucking American going over there. Like, it's just how we confuse ourselves.
Can we show them the video clip one more time? Just, as we ended off for today, just that little snippet where she says white people are going to be called Cherokee, and she reads the word rebellion from this own lawful document called the treaty.
Sounds like what the Australians done did, the quote unquote Australians.
Reads, and I quote, "All native-born Cherokee, all Indians and whites legally members of the nation by adoption, and all freemen who have been liberated by voluntary act of their former owner."
Stop it right there. We heard it. Heard it right there.
It's just gonna be tough because I've already noticed on Twitter these white people with the feathers in their bios, so they're claiming to be Native Americans, and I'm like, oh,
This is
Lord.
You've been adopted because you had.
Well, who adopted you?
Mm-hmm.
Where's this paperwork saying you're adopted from what chief? Like what?
It's a made up person. That's why they you highlighted.
They follow trends.
A nation. That's why they're Cherokee Nation now. Cherokee, Choctaw Nation, Seminole Nation. we were just straight tribe names.
Right.
Wasn't any nation. Now, when you have that nation, you can make up people. Oh yeah, you don't even have to be by blood. We're just adopting you into this
Right.
by name only. So again,
It's insane.
we're the
Can
true
we do
American.
the last little piece where she says rebellion in about 10?
Yeah.
Yep, just about 10 more seconds.
or by law, as well as free colored persons who were in the country at the commencement of the rebellion and are now residents therein.
Not
So-
making this up, people.
So white people can claim to be who we are, but as far as people of color, we're just this people of color, blah,
Right.
blah, 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 blah. But white European, you could be Cherokee, you could be Choctaw, you could be,
Mhm.
the floor is open, but people of color and
Coming
Sister-
directly out of an American
Caucus
woman's mouth.
chairman. So it's like,
Exactly.
like you said,
Exactly.
Chief, like, yeah, this is a stage. Like this is not even making sense. This is
White.
just what are you
White
talking
just
about?
means you can shape shift into other people's.
They doing it, man. Bro, I know
nationalities,
you people that shit on
but-
Twitter, these white people or Europeans, nothing wrong with Europeans, whatever, whoever watch the channel. But these Europeans with the feather in the bio now, like, you know how the natives are. I'm just looking like, all right, just because your skin's super tan, you know, almost red, it's happening.
It's a scary situation because even though we're kind of getting humor out of this because we studied to show ourselves approved so we can cite back the documents and we're exposing that they are doing a ritual or a play to further exterminate us. The reality of this is we're not represented in this hearing and we're still being benign and neglected. So there's a reason that they're saying by 2053, this group will be a wealthless group of people because they've already, you're not in the plans.
Mhm.
Right.
And so there's a serious component here if we tie in what happened with Trump this week with being raided by the FBI, and then you've now seen militia pop up at these FBI facilities. Again, we look at that and we look at that as if that's something that we can't do, that they can do. At some point, we have to understand pulling up on these type of hearings and things like that to be a part of we won't stand up as a group. That's the frustrating part for me when I look at this group of people. We're afraid. We're afraid, you know, we'll talk big shit amongst each other, but we won't stand up to any other group or any other institution that is really suppressing you. And we're at a point where, shout out to the NFAC, Grandmaster Jay was the only one in my lifetime that actually pulled up. But we're at a point now where fighting amongst each other, everybody is just kind of leapfrogging over us, getting resources. And we have to start standing up for ourselves against other groups of people. And we're not there yet as a group.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Something that made me think, you know, just deep diving critical thinking before we get off. I'm always watching something simple. It's called I Am Groot on Disney Plus.
Mm.
It's this little tree man. He found a civilization, these super tiny animals. He found them. They lived under the ground. He was just playing with them, but then he sneezed and it almost killed them all. So then they started throwing rocks at him. Then next thing you know, planes started coming out and they were shooting lasers, and then things started coming out the ground and they're having a whole battle with this thing. And I'm like, oh, that's a civilization.
Mhm.
You gotta have a defense. And sadly, this group is just, we don't even have that. We have nothing to defend ourselves. And the people that pretend to defend us, they're doing clown shit like this.
That's a great point. Even the smallest and you know, what some would say the weakest of individuals will fight for their life or fight for their survival. Just in that example, and even going back to the you know, Ukraine, Russia, Taiwan, China, like
Afghans.
you know, they're like, look, we don't care how big you are. We going to do what's necessary to protect ourselves and our homeland. And we just have to get that mindset as a group of people. This is our land. So when they say go back to Africa, I say, no, you go back to Europe. You came over from those boats.
All right. Just projection with that come back to Africa shit.
Okay.
Go back, bitch. I can't go nowhere.
I'm rooted.
For real, like it's just weird now.
Everybody got closing. What do y'all want to close this out with based on what we proved today?
There's no civil war.
Again, just unrepresentation, and benign and neglect. I mean, that's just basically what I get from it. Is it just continues.
I'll close it with it's just amazing to see how far they'll go to continue this law of Europeans being Americans. Like this shit is real. Like these people really walk around claiming to be Americans, claiming to be our ancestors. Great film Titanic with the historic moment of whenever he asked her like, "Where are you guys from?" And she was like, "I'm American." And it's like, damn, you own the boat, bitch. You're literally coming like you literally own, like you coming over here on it, and you're talking about you're American already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, damn, like this is how far they'll go. They'll even have bullshit hearings that they've scripted to make the people believe that. And this ain't really for us because niggas don't really pay attention to this shit. This for the whole world to see.
Mm-hmm.
So the rest of the world like, oh, so that's what the American. And it's like, nah, dog, we got this in at home fight that we got to really just mush everybody out the way and be like, all right, this is what it is. But the Honorable Maxine Waters is gonna completely, like Chief Quad Waters said, but not neglect us.
Yeah, my closing, we're to a point where we have to check these other groups of people. We're never in the room when the business is being talked about. Yeah, this is on the world stage, and we're at a point where we can't wait on other people to do it. I believe that the people on this channel, I think we need to correspond with Maxine Waters. I think we're the most qualified amongst our people. We can sit online and we can talk about it, and we can, there's a lot of channels talking about that we're American and different things like that, but we studied to show ourselves approved. So at this point, if you feel that you have the freedom to petition or have a request from a public servant, then what's stopping you? I know from my own personal experience, I've walked many of battles in the public arena, and our people are scared to do that. So I think that's a charge on us because we have done the work to contact this member of the Black Caucus. And you need to add some qualified people on this hearing, the next hearing that you have, because everything y'all saying is inaccurate, and be able to educate them and hear what their response is. That's going to be the key, is how do they respond? How does the Black Caucus respond? Do they go in denial? Do they try to brush us off and try to put fear tactics? It still doesn't change the truth. You read it yourself, Maxine Waters. We got you. You read directly from that Cherokee Treaty, and it did not say civil war.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing in closing is the people have to stand up. If you're waiting on these ritualistic pseudo-public servants to represent you coming out of the Black Caucus, they haven't done so since 1971. Do I have anything, Chief Pico?
I think you can end it right there, man. You said it right there. You said it right there. So we'll come.